About ready now? Excellent. Well, I was going to play a little banjo to go along with that and realized that I was playing banjo to the live stream and not to what it was actually doing, and well, that probably wouldn't line up very well, would it? Gonna have to figure that out. So let us know in the comments how the audio is doing. We made some changes to our audio, and let's see which cam are we on now? I definitely know which one I'm doing. All right, so we're just doing a live stream to test our equipment once again. If you do have any questions, leave them in the comments, and we will answer them. I really got nothing that I need to do right now, other than maybe play with Terrell some. And yeah, so there we go. Looks like I can actually see the comments now on an app. There we go. Audio sounds good. Excellent. We were having a little bit of issues with crackling and popping last time that we did a live stream. Turns out I didn't have the antenna on it, and the antenna evidently helps, but it's also an old, like VHF or UHF frequency device, and those get a lot of interference, it seems. Let's see. Darwin Bonk, I think that's how you pronounce your name, asks, am I planning to attend any RC events this year? I am not sure is the question. I would certainly like to, maybe later in this year, but I do have a family and, of course, a business to attend to, and it's kind of difficult these days to get out and travel like I used to, but I would certainly like to. I will be at UST for 2022. Wow, what year is it? But yeah, I'll be at the USTE, the Ultimate Scale Truck Expo down in Florida next, it's usually, February or so. I'll be at that next year. Where's Terrell? There's Terrell. Yeah, so the audio, we did make some changes to. Had to turn down levels on one of the boards and turn up levels on another board. And that seems to have helped the quality of the audio. Just let us know if there's any dropouts. Let us know if there's any glitching, anything like that. And I'll just go down and read some comments. BRXL, Austin asks, when is the BRXL going to be back in stock? We too have inventory. We are waterproofing them as fast as we can. And we'll be in stock as soon as we can get the next batch up. You can find them on places like AMain and RPP, supershafty.com. A lot of those websites are the reason why we may not have them in stock right now. They bought them all from us, as vendors tend to do. Let's see. Audio is good. Audio is better. Where's Terrell? There's Terrell. All right. Revolver 380 V2 go live. We are looking to launch that this week. We do have to package them up, make sure that everything is there and in order, and that just takes a little bit of time. Some of our motors come in prepackaged and we just check them out. We throw some stickers in there and it's good, but the smaller motors like the 380 and the 380 V2 need a little bit more packaging, so that's going to take a little bit longer, but we are aiming to launch those this week. Great question. What is the largest KV regular revolver you'd use with a Mamba Micro X on 3S with a 5.5 pound crawler? Bird 7X asks, I would say this depends on your gearing. However, the 2500 kV is the max kV that we offer in the revolver right now, and I would not hesitate with the new 10-pole design to use that on a micro. The no-load amp draw is low enough that it should have no problem. If you want to be safe, though, then I would go to like a 2200 or even an 1800 kV, which in my opinion is plenty of wheel speed for the average person. All right. Why don't I make a submarine-rated crawler servo? Because they always get water in them. They always get water in them. And because of that, we have backed off of making waterproof servos. We have in the past, and we just do not recommend that people go submarining with them. What you can do, however, is fill the case with dielectric grease. That will definitely help, but it is something that you have to keep an eye on, and you have to rebuild them many times over the year. Maybe check it out, once every 3 months, but most people don't have a problem when they fill them with dielectric grease. If you want a waterproof servo, even if it is already waterproof from the factory, that is really the only way that you can guarantee that it won't fail down the road. We've seen plenty of waterproof servos fail. Obviously, the ones from Traxxas are supposed to be waterproof, and those don't like water. It's just really hard to keep water out of all electronics, even motors. The big thing with motors and also the servos is that they thermal cycle. And every time you have an object that gets hot and then cools down, moisture will condense on the inside, and it will also create a negative vacuum on the inside, which will pull water through the actual wire jacket, around the sides of the wires where they enter on the strain relief on the side of it. Even with motors that are totally sealed, it'll suck moisture down the wires. We've seen even with the axe is completely sealed for all intents and purposes, and they still get rust on the inside, whether it be from the thermal cycling or even where the bearing is on those. That's another point of entry. Where the bearing is, it has, even though it's a really tight fit, every time it thermal cycles, it pulls a vacuum on the inside of it, and that will end up pulling moisture in. So to answer your question, the reason why we don't, it is that there's really no such thing as a waterproof servo or waterproof anything for electronics, although motor speed controllers is a little bit easier to get those waterproof. So we would rather just tell people up front that they're not waterproof and have them put a big old slap of grease on the inside themselves. Much more reliable than relying on a case seal or even conformal on the boards. All right, let's see, what's next on here? Loose hips Travis Pastrami on my left. Which left? Where's, oh, yes, he's in one of the rigs. This is Terrell here. Next question, how is the Sur-Ron Luna holding up? All right, we got two. I have two of the Sur-Rons. One of them is a green, older version. It was the first one. And the second one is the, whatever they called it, the Extreme or whatnot. The green one, we're having a little bit of problems with it cutting off randomly. I'm not sure if it's the BMS or, well, I've taken all of the sensors off of it. I don't have a kickstand sensor. I don't have the tilt sensor on it anymore, and it still is randomly cutting off here and there. So I'm not sure if it is an issue with the batteries or the BMS. Still trying to hunt that one down. Last couple times we rode it, though, there hasn't been any issue, so not quite sure what's going on with that. The black one, I actually had an issue with the throttle. The cable frayed on me, which happens with a cable throttle, and it actually stuck at half throttle, which on that guy is kind of a problem because it was 25 miles an hour, and the brakes aren't so strong that it'll actually stop the rig when it's going, and I don't have brake cutoffs on there because they tend to fail, so I take them off. And yeah, no good. However, I was fortunate enough to know that you can just turn the switch off and coast to a stop. Then I had to fiddle around with it and then limp home at like 5 miles an hour so that it wouldn't get stuck open. And that needs a little bit of work too. But otherwise, the Sur-Rons have been doing great. Love those guys. Just need to do a little bit of troubleshooting like any other bike. They always take work. So that's, had them for enough years. They need work. All right, next question. Lunch break is over, Mark. Sorry to hear that. Heat issues with the Polar 513XX with a BR Mini on a TZ 2.5 running 9-tooth pinion and spur. What does I suggest on the gearing for that? Mark asks. So, heat issues. It's probably your dig ratio. You probably got somewhere between like 25 and 35% overdrive in your rig, and that is going to make basically any small motor run hot. What I would recommend is that you just kind of let it run hot. The magnet grade that I use on the BR Mini, or I'm sorry, on the Polar 500s, on all the Polars, is a 180 Celsius rated one. You can have spit boil off of that motor and it'll still run just fine. We do a braze on the commutator, and the brazing, basically the motor's gonna be on fire before the commutator lets go. The commutator will be on fire at that point. So really don't worry about heat issues. If it's running anywhere under 180 degrees Fahrenheit, if you're doing competition style crawling, that's totally fine, short run times. If it's running under 160 Fahrenheit, which is still enough to scald your finger, you can't keep your finger on 160 Fahrenheit, that is totally fine for long trail rides. So even if your motor runs hotter than what you would like to do, I would say it's okay. The reason why the Polar 500s run a little hotter is twofold. For one, as compared to something like a Sagami can or normal Torquemaster Pro, Crowmaster Crow, the Polar housing is smaller in diameter. It has less surface area to dissipate heat, so that creates an increased surface temperature. Just from that thermal equilibrium standpoint, you're going to have a hotter motor when you have less surface area to dissipate the exact same amount of heat. The second issue with the Polars is that it has neodymium magnets, and if you have even the same coercive force between two different magnets, which is how I designed that one, I kind of backward engineered it from what I knew worked on the FB9 magnets. When you have a thinner magnet that is a higher strength, your effective air gap is actually smaller. So let's just imagine you have a magnet that's this thick and you have a magnet that's this thick. The average pulling force is from the midpoint of your magnet, and that is where you would actually calculate from. And the thicker magnet, your midpoint is going to be further away. Your rotor is down here, so your midpoint is further away than on this one, where your midpoint is just right off the surface of the magnet. What this does with a thinner magnet, a stronger neodymium magnet, is it creates a higher idle amp draw, because essentially your effective air gap, it's smaller in a sense. It's really not a smaller air gap in practice, but the way that it works, you have more magnetic force closer to your stator, so your no-load losses end up going up because of it. One way to combat that is a larger air gap, but you lose drag brake and torque density and a lot of things that is probably beyond this video right now. But long answer to a short question: pullers run a little bit hotter than normal motors. I wouldn't worry about it unless it's literally smoking hot. So above 180 Fahrenheit for competition use and 160 Fahrenheit for normal trailing use. Don't know if that totally answers your question, but I hope that helps. Right, let's keep going down. What is your inspiration for products? Rob Lowe asks. The inspiration that I've had for products since day one was products that I wanted to run myself and usually couldn't get. So starting out with the Revolver, that was one of our first motor lines. There was really nothing out there. There was a lot of Outrunners that you could buy, but none of them bolted up, and none of them had an 1/8" shaft, and none of them really had good startup control at the time, which was partially ESCs, partially motor design. Because the industry was trying to get that torque-dense Outrunner at the time, and not doing it with diameter, but doing it with magnetic strength. So the startup at the time just wasn't that great. So I came out with the Revolver, had the size that we needed, the face mounting that we needed, the shaft size that we needed, and kind of went from there. On the subject of brushed motors, engineered motors like the Magnum and the pullers that I've done a lot more engineering for, on those, it's the same thing. I wanted something that was a little bit lighter. At the time, originally, the only way we could get lighter brushed motors was to do either a custom housing or, thin the back iron, which is a terrible way to lose weight on a motor. You can shave a couple of grams off of it, but you're taking it from the back iron, and the magnets need that to function properly. So you end up losing, again, torque density. You end up losing your drag brake. And going with a thinner can was just a bad idea. So I did that for about a year, essentially at customer request. They said, hey, I want a thin can motor because they're lighter. So, okay, I made them. And then after driving them myself, decided that, no, that is not the way to go. And I designed the puller housings just because the magnetics was there. I understood it enough, and I had the time to prototype. It was a dozen plus 13 magnetic different layouts. And, finally, of course, hit the one that I wanted to. Updates on the Revolvers, same sort of thing. I see tweaks that I want for myself, the things that I see that the motor may need, and that's what we do. Same thing for working on ESCs, although I'm not doing all the engineering on the Crawlmasters. It is still something to where I say, hey, this is what I need, and I hire engineers to help out with that, because I'm still not a great software engineer, it turns out, but what I can do is layout of it. I can do PCB layout. I'm pretty good at that, although not the fastest still working on that. But what I can really do well is design a motor to go along with the ESC. And it's a lot easier to say, hey, I need the ESC to do this when I know what the motor needs. Or vice versa, of course. Hey, I need the motor to do this because this is what the ESC needs. And so we go back and forth. Same thing for the extra high voltage, super high voltage, whatever you want to call them, servos. At the time, I saw really a need in the market to where I didn't want a BEC for myself. It was very self-interested that I didn't want a BEC. So I designed a servo that didn't need a BEC. And again, I didn't do all the design. I did the case design, took some off-the-shelf gears at the time, and then said, hey, you servo motor factory, build me some electronics that will take a higher voltage. And we had custom part numbers for it and everything. So it was, only mine because I paid for the engineering so that it would be only mine. And of course, as some Chinese factories tend to do over time, they renege on that promise, and my engineering unfortunately got released to the mess. But that, I think, probably was a more fortunate aspect of it as well, because now we have a lot of choices for that 16-volt range servo, and it has really changed the market as far as what power we can see, what efficiency we can see, and the flexibility of being able to run without a BEC is pretty nice. So again, long answer for a short question. What inspires me to create products? It is pretty much always when I want it for myself first. It's always what I want to use or what needs to fit in my rigs and what is going to be the smoothest startup for me. And it has to meet my standards, or else it doesn't get my name on it. Because otherwise, what good is it? We don't want to come out with second-rate stuff. That seems to be a waste of time. All right, moving on. More questions. Lots of questions here. Let's see. Revolver for the SCX 24. So we are coming out probably this week with the 380 revolver. This is a re-release of the 380. We were planning on calling it the 280, and it ended up accidentally moving with the same laser art as the original did, so now it's still called the 380. That one actually will fit in the SCX 24. A lot of people do it. You will need a different motor mount on there, and it's a plate that you can print yourself or you can buy places that converts it into a little bit larger mounting style. I want to say it needs to space away from the transmission just a little bit. I haven't done it on mine yet because I really just got a SCX 24 not too long ago. So y'all have to tell me what y'all have done to install the Revolver 380. We are going to get some brushed motors in as well for the SCX 24. They are in production. I'm not sure when they're going to be done. I would estimate probably 3 weeks or so, maybe 4. Let's see. Would you recommend a 16-turn Crawlmaster Pro for a Capra with a 10-tooth pinion, says Austin. Yes, I would. That is probably my favorite all around for the Capra. As low of a pinion use you can get, which normally is a 10-turn, you can't, or 10-tooth, you can fit a 9-tooth on there if you want. With something like a Crawlmaster Expert or Pro, it's got 4 mounting holes in this position. You can actually use the 2 that are across from each other to mount, and you can fit a 9-tooth pinion that way. So 16-turn, that is definitely my recommendation for a brush motor in the Capra. Drift Craze 2 says, I set my BR Mini Dual ESC today with Team Puller 513 terms, and they did run a little warm. They will. As I mentioned earlier, in this live stream, the pullers run a little warm. They do that, and it's okay. Alrighty, let's see. Moving on, lots of questions. What is the most durable skid-mounted transmission you would recommend if you were building a custom rock bouncer? I got one right here. It's going to be a bomb-proof transmission. Would that be a slang term for farts? Bum-poofs? Any rate, back to this. The bomb-proof, now it's going to be hard to get that out of my head. The bomb-proof transmission from Super Shafty is what I use on my builds when I want really high power. Rock bouncers, rock racers, or just something like a revolver when you have a lot of spinning mass like that, and you don't want to let off when you're kind of bouncing through the rocks doing something like a. If you just saw the Whistling Diesel test of the Hilux, where the video 3 where he goes out to Moab, and it just beats the living crap out of the Hilux on the rocks. A lot of people crawl like that, to where it's just kind of, keep it up, bam, bam, bam. And if you're running either a high-powered motor or something with a lot of heft like the Revolver, a lot of rotating mass, you need a transmission that's going to be stout. And all metal gears goes so far, but then you have issues with the transmission housing actually flexing if you have a plastic housing. We've had customers actually rip the housing right off of the skid plate. Just because of the sheer torque of the motors, and the plastic doesn't hold threads very well. It's kind of funny to see that sort of stuff happen, but like I tend to say, not very often, but Holmes Hobbies has driven a lot of aftermarket transmission and axle upgrades and stuff like that, because normal stock motors just don't put out a whole lot of power. But when you upgrade it to a nice hand wound or brushless motor, stuff like that, you end up putting down so much power that you find the weak points in there. So to summarize again, bomb-proof transmissions from Super Shafty, that would be my choice if I'm looking for something that's just a regular old skid-mounted, just beefy old transmission. Been using them for a really long time, and the only thing that goes out on them is bearings, and that's usually my fault for getting them in sand and grit and water. So there you go. Let's see if there's any more questions here. What products are you most proud of? Gareth asks. Oh, that's a tough one. I really like the Revolvers. There's a lot of pride in being able to take a motor from essentially just having a stator, because the stators are, as I've spoken of before, the very expensive part, not only to have produced, but also to design properly. The stator is the heart of the motor. And there's a lot of stators out there, so it's fairly easy to design everything around a stator that's already available that works fairly well. Long term, I would like to produce my own stators, just crunched some motors in FEMM, finite engineering or finite element magnetic analysis software. But as far as being able to do the rest of it, doing the magnets, doing the back iron, doing the housing and everything, I really enjoy the revolvers. It's one of my favorite motors to drive to begin with, so it's just really satisfying to be able to do that. The Magnum would probably be the other one that I'm really proud of, and that one has to do with both having a sexy housing as much as having really good magnetics. Pardon me. So on the Magnum, I took all of the lessons that I learned from both revolver engineering and the puller engineering, and I feel like I really got lucky because the first magnetic design that I did was by far the best, and it basically never works out that way. And I can use the finite element magnetic analysis software to get me really close and to make a lot of assumptions on things, but it really doesn't take the place of everyday testing. It really doesn't, because it might say that my deton torque is going to be minimized on a certain magnetic layout, but then in practice, maybe a little bit of change with the laminations, maybe there's a little bit of air gap difference. There's a lot of things that actually happen when you build a motor that make it to where it's not totally ideal. So even when I crunch the numbers in software, I like to always go back and make sure that it actually works out. And with the Magnum, I just hit it right on the nose. And I did manual calculations on that one. I didn't actually run it through FEMM, but I knew what I was looking for, and so that one, just hitting it first time, man, it feels like hitting a home run with the bases loaded. And then after I got the magnetics known and nailed, I was able to make the housing even fancier looking, actually shave some weight off of a stock Sagami can. So we end up with a lighter motor that performs a lot better, has better drag brake, the torque density is there, extremely smooth startup. They're the smoothest starting brush motors that we offer. So that one, it's between that and the revolvers, I would say at this time. Although the ESC project, okay, so every product I am proud of. The ESC project has been a lot of fun too, but I mean years on that one. And I can see that there's a lot more that needs to be done. It's one of those projects that's really never going to end on that. So it's not like a motor to where you can kind of get that best motor that you feel that you can get and then call it good for a long time with the ESC. I feel that the industry moves fast enough and that our components move fast enough, the ICs that I can get, the Hall sensors that we can get, the rotational Hall sensors that are available, the MOSFETs are constantly changing, the MOSFET drivers are constantly changing, and so it's one of those things that it's going to have to be kind of an incremental, just constant engineering on there. So yeah, yet again, long answer to a short question. I'll try to keep it more succinct, but at the same time, these are good questions here, so I appreciate the support and the questions y'all are asking. All right, let's see. I am going to have to find where I am on these. Delrin, sustainable. All right. Marcus asked, he says he loves our sustainable aspect. How do you integrate it into your RC business? That is a very tough topic because I feel like just in general, the world is at a non-sustainable point right now. We use fossil fuels to move our food around. We use fossil fuels to grow our food. We use fossil fuels to produce these plastic and glass and IC integrated circuits, everything like that. And as far as the business is concerned, I come at it from a few sides. Number one, I want to make sure that the products are actually quality products. I'm not trying to flip a quick buck sort of thing, but I really enjoy the engineering aspect of it, and I really enjoy crawling. It's kind of a toss-up. Do I like making the stuff more than I like crawling these days? But I really love crawling. So to make a sustainable business, you have to make sure that you're not shooting yourself in the foot with either low-quality products or not forward-looking on the product design. So that's one way. The second way is to make sure that I set everything up with the market in mind. And that's kind of a broad statement, but what I mean by that is that there are vendors, there are hobby shops, there are people who survive by being a reseller, and that's a large portion of the market. And so whenever I design something, I need to make sure that it not only hits a price point that the market will sustain and that the market wants to see, it also needs to hit a price point that allows vendors to have their part in the market too. Not all companies operate like this. I know some very large companies that operate with razor thin margins for their wholesale, and it makes it really tough to survive as a hobby shop or a reseller when the big guys keep shoving your margins down. And there's large companies that offer maybe 20%, which in my opinion you can't survive on. So the other aspect, of course, with the products is making the products fit within the market and also making sure that I support everybody else in the market at the same time. The third aspect of being sustainable is that we do a lot of manufacturing here in the US. We don't do all of the manufacturing here in the US because for things like brushless motors, I think we may be able to hit a $300 price point on a brushless motor made in the United States. I know that people won't buy that. There may be a couple people that will, but for the most part, they won't. And that's getting sub-assemblies made, getting rotors made and doing the winding in-house and gluing everything together. That $300 price point is getting sub-assemblies made. Even looking at new motors with their price points, they've been $300, $350 for most of their 540 size motors. They're using imported labor. So they're using Mexican labor, the same as Novak was doing back in the day, to where essentially migrant workers come to your business for the day. They do all the motor winding, they do all the motor assembly. They work for less than minimum wage or less than an American would have to work to support his job out in California where these businesses are. And I feel in a lot of ways using that to say, American made is sort of disingenuous, that I could make things in the US if I had a factory on the Texas border and had Mexicans or whoever from South America coming up and working for the day and going back down. So the other sustainability aspect, really I feel like the most important one is cultivating an environment at the shop where people want to work. They want to be there. I need to be able to pay them not only a living wage, but better than a living wage so that they can deal with some of the frustrations of being in a manufacturing environment. It's mentally taxing, it's physically taxing, and not everybody wants to sit there for 8 hours a day winding motors or assembling motors or anything. And I don't expect that out of workers. The way that it usually goes about is that I'll say, okay, we need this much. I know that we need 30 hours a week and we can get the job done in 30 hours a week. It is on to you, the employee, to make sure that you put those hours in and that we get the work done. If you want to work 40, that's great. If you want to put in overtime, that's great too, because once you get trained in something like that, you're probably going to be the best at it. And I have always felt that give my employees as much rope as they need to live their life, not work to live, but live to work, and they will want to stay as employees, of course, along with having a fair wage is a big part of it. And not getting them in trouble for making mistakes is another big one. There's a lot of aspects to this portion of it, but if I say, hey, go cut a hole in that wall, and they go cut a hole in the wall and hit an electrical wire or hit a water line or something like that, I'm not gonna be mad at them for doing what I told them to do and making a mistake, or I didn't give them enough information to avoid that mistake, or maybe they were just careless and made the mistake. But at the same time, they were doing the job that I told them to do, and I never am punitive or say, oh, you're gonna pay for that or whatever. I've had a lot of bosses that were like that, and it's not the way to operate, in my opinion, if you want to have a workforce that wants to be there. So let's recap that. Sustainability in the business. We have to design good products. We have to be within the market in a way that the market wants us to participate and everybody in the market. And then I need to ensure that I cultivate a good working environment on top of all of that. And when it all comes together, we end up being a business. And this is 16 years now with that, which is amazing. It's not what I expected to be doing for a living. I was going to be a real estate agent, I tell you. And yeah, that didn't happen. That wasn't my bag. All right, again, long answer, short question. So let's keep going here. Let's see. I'm going to have to find where we were because y'all have shown a lot of comments. Let's see. Here we go. Progress on programming for the Crawlmaster V1 ESC. Yes, there has been progress. Humboldt EF asks, we have the programming suite working right now. We need to make some tweaks for the upcoming firmware because I don't want to release the programming suite and then say, hey, you need a firmware update. That's kind of difficult to do on the first one. So I don't have a timeline for when that will be released, but we have working ones. They are functional. We are currently designing the little PCB for the programming dongle or whatever you want to call it. That's kind of the last key to it because I could have y'all use serial to USB devices. We could honestly hack a CastleLink device and make it work. But you could even use an Arduino. But I'd really like to have it to where you have a very low cost or even a free chip that you can purchase, a free chip that you don't have to purchase for that first, so that it's not so much hacking and having it's just something that most people don't want to do. So we're really close. We have functional devices right now, and we just kind of need to polish it up a little bit better and make sure that we have devices that will work with your computer without you jumping through a whole bunch of hoops to make it work and buying or downloading a bunch of software suites. So yeah, we're on it though. We're working really hard. I have essentially 2 full-time engineers that are doing nothing but working on that right now. So awesome. I can't wait myself. All right, what's next? T-Shack 73, Revolver Comp Crawler application question, 2040 versus 1800, pros and cons for different KV. In a comp crawler, I feel like I always get myself in trouble when I have a motor that is too fast. In my opinion, 1800 kV is plenty of wheel speed for almost all competition aspects. The only time you need that extra wheel speed bump is when you don't quite have traction, and in a competition, you're going to be spending a lot of time setting up your tires and foams. So you should have traction. Everybody should have a similar amount of traction. Now, as far as the KV that is most common, a lot of people run 35-turn motors, which is about the same speed as 1500 kV. So in my opinion, 1800 kV is going to be that sweet spot for competition style crawling, where you don't have so much wheel speed that you get yourself in trouble, but you have enough wheel speed to bump over an object at the same time. 2040 kV, yeah, you could probably gear it down and have about the same sort of use. If you can get the same wheel speed out of a 2040 versus an 1800, that means you have more gear down, and this is going on the volt up gear down path, but we're going to KV up gear down instead. Then you get better drag brake, you get slower startup speed, you get better torque performance at your tire, you end up getting more efficient running because you need less amperage to do the same job, and all in all, a faster motor geared down more to get your same wheel speed is actually going to work better. So maybe 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but I still do feel that an 1800 kV is kind of the sweet spot all around for competing, definitely. But 2000 kV, it is still pretty close, and it would still work just fine. So it's kind of one of those things where you can't make a bad choice. It is how a lot of questions go when people ask, what motor should I run? When we're talking about the motors within our catalog, there really is no bad choice as long as you get your wheel speed right. So that's kind of what you need to run with, is the wheel speed that you need. All right, True North RC, the 380 will work for the SCX24 IC. Yes, it will, but you will need that motor plate like I discussed. If you search on, what are those 3D software, Thingiverse. If you search on Thingiverse, I'm pretty sure you can find that motor plate there that will convert your SCX24 to an Outrunner motor plate. All right, Drift Craze. I have a G-Made crawler, 8th scale, close to 9 pounds. What motor do you recommend? Oh, G-Made. So the problem with G-Made crawlers is they're kind of weak. They break easily, and so I want to say, hey, you should run something like a Revolver Classic, 1450 kV, would be slow enough that you probably won't break gears, but even a normal revolver, honestly, normal 540 revolver is plenty for a 9-pound rig. Again, one of those answers to where any of our motors in the catalog are going to work pretty much. I would suggest you stay with a low KV, 1800 and less with a G-Made, because they're kind of weak, and the first thing that breaks crawlers is usually wheel speed. So not really familiar with G-Made crawlers other than them breaking a lot. Hope that helps you. Low and Slow, have you seen the Furatech ESCs? All right, how were they able to achieve FOC/sensor to control a motors not capable of true FOC? Yes, I have seen these ESCs, and they are not FOC. They are approximated sine wave at best. There is no motor learning function on them, which is a dead giveaway that it's not FOC. You cannot have FOC without some sort of motor learning, because you need to know the back EMF and the reluctance, the reactance of the motor. so that you can predict how to do essentially the phase shifts to keep torque vectoring. Because that FOC, field oriented control, is also called torque vectoring. And the way that it torque vectors is that it has to know exactly when to inject how much current and where the rotor is positioned. And if you don't know basic things about the motor, like the back EMF waveform, you got to know the inductance of the motor and the resistance of the motor. So you need to know how it's going to react to the inputs from the ESC to do true FOC. If it's not doing all of that, it is basically a sine wave controller. Maybe it's a sine wave controller. They could just be doing 6-step and calling it FOC. If the e-bike industry is any lesson, there are a ton of vendors that are going to start using either sine wave or FOC terminology because Hobbywing has had a good run with FOC. You're going to see a lot of people claiming FOC that is not FOC because, again, if you don't have a learning mode on there, you are stuck with one motor. And that's what Hobbywing has done is they stick you with certain motors and they say this is all that you can use and there's no learning function on them, so you can't use other motors. It makes it where you have to use their motors. On their behalf, a good choice. On the consumer behalf, not the best choice as far as universal use. Now I'm just going to be ranting about about FOC and people using the term incorrectly. So yeah, I don't believe the Furatech is FOC. It'd be a lot smoother if it was to begin with, and there's no way that it's universal without having learning modes on there. So I don't believe them. All right, let's keep going. Polar Pro 540 XL in my Rift, but want more power. What motor do you suggest with a Mamba Castle Mamba X? The Rift is going to work well with a 540L size motor as well. The let's see, what do we call it? Polar Pro R is the ones that we have in the 540L size. And we have a variety of KV choices. So whatever KV you're using right now in the XL, honestly, if you want more power with a brushless motor, you can just gear it up, gear it taller, and you will be just fine. But if you want to get a new motor, then I would drop back one size to that 540L. We can get a lot higher KV on those. And honestly, I mean, the Rift comes with like a 2200 KV. You go with anything above that, you're going to get a lot more power. 2700 kV from the feedback that I've gotten is just practically uncontrollable with the Rift. So I can't exactly recommend that you go there, but if that's what you want to do, then that's what you need to do. Let's see. Jake T picked up a Polar Pro Stubby 2700 and loves it so far. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you, sir. SMG Inc. How do I lose weight? This is a really simple question. It is actually calories in versus calories out. It doesn't matter what your macros are, your mix of fat or carbs or protein, calories in versus calories out. You got to take in less calories than you are burning, or let's see, how do I say this? You need to eat less if you want to lose weight. And a pound of fat is something like it's like 2,000 calories or something around there. So if you have a 200 calorie deficit a day, which isn't a huge one, it takes about 10 days to lose a pound. So over a month's time, you'll lose about 3 pounds a day. 200 calorie a day deficit is sustainable. It's not one that's going to put you into, you know, a really bad keto mode or anything like that. But you may find that you're a little bit more sensitive to carbs versus, you know, fats or fats versus carbs. And so every person ends up having to tweak themselves a little bit. What I would recommend is that you bump your protein intake up a little bit, because if you're going to cut calories, then you probably want to cut calories from carbs first, because most of us eat way too much. When I started tracking my macros, I was eating, it was like 60% of my calories a day were carbs generally, and the rest were fats, and then there's like 15 to 10% protein. It was a pretty horrible mix. So if you do go to cut calories, make sure that you replace those lost carbs with just a, you know, bump your protein up a little bit, and that'll at least keep you from losing muscle mass at the same time. So completely off topic there, but good question. All right, let's see what we got. Mile High RC, ice cream or frozen yogurt? Ice cream, definitely ice cream. I'm not a sweets person, but definitely ice cream. All right, Missouri Scalers, Rabid Bobcat, that's right. Let's see. Hey, Scale Builders Guild, good to see you here. Good to see you here. He picked up a new ESC. Is there a motor limit for 3S that I'm recommending? So we have that listed on the website currently for 3S. I know I didn't do the best job about wording everything, but on 3S use, our current limits are 2,500 kV for 10-pole outrunners, 2,200 kV for 14-pole outrunners, which you can kind of fudge that with our team spec 2250. That's okay. Then we go to 4-pole and 6-pole. You can go up to 2,700 kV, and that's what I've tested so far on 3S. I run 3S all the time. That's pretty much all that I run. For 4S use on the ESC, right now it's limited to 1,400 kV until we get the software update. And then we'll be able to do some fancy tweaks, and we will be able to bump that up probably to the normal limits that we have on 3S right now. So good question. Thanks, Scale Builders Guild. Good to see you here. All right. Let's see what we got. Ooh, have an AX10, the fish. Let's see. All right, so he's currently running axial 20-turn and 55-turn motors and are not happy. So both of those motors are, I hate to use the word, but they're kind of turds. The 55-turn motors are so slow that they make no power, and the 20-turn motors are so fast that they also make no torque. So they're really like spongy feeling. They're not great. What I would recommend is that you go with something that's either a 16-turn 5-slot like the Crawlmaster line or a 35-turn 3-slot like the Torquemaster and Trailmaster line. Those two choices are going to get you into a good wheel speed area that's not too fast. It's not going to be spongy on the throttle. You're not going to have to worry about your gearing too much, but we would always say volt up and gear down. If you want more wheel speed and you're only running 2S, you need to go to a 3S battery instead of gearing up on your pinion. So I hope that helps. Yeah, 35-turn motor, that'd be a really good start. You'll be able to use your stock ESCs with those and just kind of drop them in and go. My favorite is the 16-turn Crawlmasters, for sure. The Element is actually really fun to drive. That's probably my favorite. I mean, they're all pretty fun. Let's see. The Capra's all right. The Rift, not into the Rift. I really like this old K5 Blazer. It's super hard to drive. It's really heavy. I haven't driven it in a while, but this is also one of my favorites to drive. And what else we got? I mean, they're all pretty fun. They're all pretty fun, but honestly, I've been really digging the Element. My TRX4 is really fun too, though. My son has a Sport. I drive it all the time. I've got some regular 2-speeds around here. I don't drive them as much as I should, half because 2 out of the 3, the receivers stopped binding, and there's so many channels on there, and it's such a bear to set up just all the buttons and switches on a new radio to get it to work. So probably TRX4 Sport if I'm going to say something that is bomb-proof, and then something just off the shelf that crawls really, really well is going to be either an Element Enduro or SEX102. Favorite rigs, for sure. All right, let's see. Some string of letters and numbers. Anything I should know about a Revolver V2 2500 kV and Sidewinder 4 that I just ordered the other day? I would say just make sure that you program your Sidewinder for it. You're going to get a lot better low speed control if you follow our programming guides. The Copperhead one that we did is the most up-to-date, and it's going to have pretty much all the features that the Sidewinder 4 has on there and just all the tips and tricks that I would use on that. So that's the biggest thing. Just make sure you program it, put a throttle curve in. All right, let's see. Let's see. Tie-dye shirts back in stock. I need to get more made. That is certainly something that I need to get more made of. We need more shirts in general. Let's see, Jerry asked again, when is the 280 going to be released? The 380 is actually the 280. We had a little problem with art, so it'll be this week. All right. Well, I am running out of time here, getting close to 3 o'clock, so we're going to have to cut it short. Let me scroll through, see if we can find any gems of questions. Yeah, I'm 10 minutes behind on here. When will we see a silencer ESC for rigs over 4 pounds? We have 2 different ones that are being developed right now. When are they going to be done? ESCs take a long time, so I don't want to put a time on it, but I am definitely working on it. All right. Let's see. Any other big ones? Bad audio patch. Thanks for the feedback. That is within a second ago. Me turning around sometimes tends to do it. I think these lights down here have some interference. Let's see. All right, last question that I am going to do. So, if I ran Sorka for a day, what rule would I change to make it more fun? That's a big, loaded question. I would get rid of all of the scale points, every single one of them. I I understand why they did it. I totally understand that Sorka was trying to encourage the scale modeling aspect, and that by putting things on your rig that normally a competition rig wouldn't have, you give yourself a disadvantage in weight or function. All the scale points have their own reasons for being. However, at the end of the day, I'm not so much of a dollhouse builder as I am a regular builder and a driver. And so for me, the scale points really take away from a lot of the fun, because the rules aren't that complicated. They've done a great job of paring them down, but it's just to that level of complexity to where I kind of have a hard time wrapping my brain around everything. And if I wanted to build one, I would basically either buy one or just copy what somebody else has done. They've already done the effort, and this is, of course, how a lot of motor builders work, is they just copy what somebody else is putting the big effort into. Since I'm a motor builder that likes to motor build, I don't do it that way. I like to build rigs, but the Sorka rules are just that much too complicated for me that I have a trouble going through all of them and kind of like wrapping my head around, okay, well, if I do this, then I can't do that, or if I do that, I can't do this. So that would be my one change. I would just wipe away all the scale points and have it be a driver's sort of deal. And just gate size, tire height restriction, maybe body aspect ratio. Make sure that your body, covers your tires or covers half your tires, or, whatever for the class. And then let everybody else just figure it out. Like, no width requirements, no wheelbase requirements, nothing but tire height and body size, and just kind of make it simple. Kind of bring it back to the old days, which they have done a great job. So I'm answering that question, but don't call that a knock on Sorka. They have done a really great job with the rules over the years. And, besides some of the issues with like the local rules coming up at competitions, there's really nothing that I could complain about at all. The local rules is mostly feedback that I hear from drivers that go out to a competition and then suddenly, oh, hey, local rules, you can hand of God after, 3 attempts through a gate. That's not what Sorka's about. And I just kind of don't like, especially like regional and national events, doing the local rules thing. I can understand if there's nobody from out of state traveling, but if there is one single person traveling from out of state to a competition, I feel like your rules either need to be to the letter, or you shouldn't be calling it those rules. And that's just an opinion that I have. Maybe somebody from Sorka is going to see this and take that advice with a grain of salt, but that would be my one recommendation to them. If they were going to do anything, maybe rein in the local rules aspect. Maybe say something like you need to announce your rules before you sell tickets, so it's not a bait and switch on people, where they build a reg to Sorka rules and then they get there and find out, oh, well, this local rule makes my winch not even need to be here, or, whatever the case may be. A local rule can really be anything. So that is what it is. All right, that should do it. I got to get out of here. It is close to 3 o'clock. I do thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you for the questions and the feedback on our feed. We're really trying to make the feeds do well, and we can't do that without you telling us if we have any problems with it. So, as always, I thank you for tuning in. Have a good day.